Yeah.
Let me just get some stuff out of the way.
Hey, and welcome to the Football Time Podcast. We're here with our man Achilles Rain. After a little time off, we're ready to get back into the football season. We've gone through free agency. The draft is upcoming. We'll be all over that in a couple weeks. But first, we're going to break down all the free agent moves on the NFC side of things this week and the AFC side of things next week, and give a little bit of the team's outlook so far. So, Achilles Rain, you ready to dive into some of the big moves in the NFC today?
Yeah, I'm excited. It's been a little while since we've actually been on here, so it'll be interesting to see what's happened since then. I know that there's been some transactions that I wouldn't say would rock the NFL, but definitely make an impact.
All right, so I thought we'd start out in the NFC East and work our way out to the West Coast. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that works with me.
All right, so let's talk about probably one of the biggest spenders in the NFC, the New York Giants. They're going pretty much all in here. Kenny Golladay, they threw a lot of money at, probably the only team who threw a lot of money at any receiver. I think the Adoree Jackson contract is confusing everyone, considering he barely even played for the Titans last year. And when he did play, that Titans defense was getting shredded in the secondary. So the fact that anyone got a free agent deal in the Titans secondary for anything more than the league minimum is a little shocking. They brought in Leonard Williams, just overall sort of go all in for it for the New York Giants. Kyle Rudolph was already sound, so is the New York Giants going to be making a big move here coming up in the next season, or are they going to still be their mediocre self?
Now, I will say this. I don't like exactly how they spent their money, but we knew coming into the offseason they had a little bit of money to spend, so they definitely had to kind of, acquire some talent. And the good news for them is that they play in the NFC East, so you're not going to have, too many issues as far as being able to compete within that division for a division title. So I like what they're doing. They were pretty good last season. They kind of grew on me as the season progressed. I saw a lot of toughness from that team, so I think I like what they're doing so far. I think that they might be ready to make a splash, make at least a run for that division. Now, how good will they be, throughout the entire season going up against every other team? I don't know that yet. But as it sits on paper, I really like the moves they made during this offseason.
I don't mind them. I was a little taken back by the Adoree Jackson move. I like the Kenny Golladay move. If he can stay healthy, that receiving core with Golladay and Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton really goes deep. You throw in Evan Ingram and Kyle Rudolph in there as a twin tight end set. I know they signed John Ross too, but I'm not factoring him in too much, other than he was really fast once at a draft combine. But other than that, John Ross hasn't proven much. But to have him as your fourth, fifth receivers really probably speaks to how impressive they were. I guess the big question here, Daniel Jones, can he take them where they want to go? It's probably pretty much make or break season for him here. They've given him now tools. You factor in Saquon Barkley coming back into that backfield. Devontae Booker backing up Saquon Barkley. So they got two, I'd say, relatively great to solid running backs, depending on what Saquon looks like when he's coming back. So I just, can Daniel Jones, I think, will be the question, take this team to where they want to go?
Yeah, like I said, they really grew on me last season as the season progressed. I think that because they play in the NFC East, I think that really helps them. If they were playing any other division, I probably wouldn't feel as strongly about them, being successful this upcoming season. But just the fact alone they're playing in the East, and the East, just from the moves that I've seen, hasn't improved that much. There's been a few improvements here and there, but I think that by far the best team, at least on paper, based off last season, in my opinion, is the New York Giants. They were competitive with the Redskins, or sorry, the Washington football team. Um, so I just feel very confident that the moves that they're making are to make a run. And like you said, this is definitely a make or break year for Jones. And I think he can do it. She showed a lot of toughness. He came back from a couple of injuries, probably a little too soon, but he really wanted to help his team and lead his team to victory because they were in the running, especially towards the end of the season. That division was just so poor that regardless of how bad the team was or how many injuries they had to deal with, basically every team in that division was in the running. So I like what they're doing. I think that they're going to be better this season. And based off the moves, until we see what happens in the draft, I really like what the Giants are doing. I foresee them doing pretty well next season.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you ask me right now, with the way that defense looked at times last year and that little brief stretch, it was probably about a 4-game stretch right before Daniel Jones got hurt, that I think we both thought the Giants were the one making the move to really take this division. Now, it was really poor, but I think out of those teams that we saw, Cowboys withstanding, we'll get to them in a little bit, but I think we saw the highest end talent probably on the Giants when they're hitting their slide. So with these free agent additions, it'll be very curious what they do in the draft. Right now, I think I make the New York Giants probably the definite favorite right now in the NFC East.
I also saw a lot of toughness from them compared to the other teams in the East. I know that a lot of teams, especially like the Cowboys, had some really devastating injuries, losing their quarterback. But overall, I felt like the Giants probably brought a lot more grit to every single game. I felt like they were in it even against some really tough teams. I believe they even beat Tampa Bay, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, they did. No, they lost to them in overtime. They blew that game.
Okay, yes. It was a tight game, though, and this is,
that was about the time we were burying Tampa Bay and calling them a joke.
Well, I think I defended them a little bit as the season went on, and it was towards the end. The ones I stopped liking them as much.
Yeah. All right. So let's move to the next team that made a handful of interesting moves here. The Washington football team brings in a new quarterback. I don't know if he's quite the answer at quarterback, but he is probably better than what they've had, at least the last handful of years. So Ryan Fitzpatrick goes over there on a 1-year deal. He's not necessarily the starter. They're going to, give Heineke and Kyle Allen a chance, but I have a feeling this is Fitzpatrick's team. They made a nice move in signing Curtis Samuel. I really liked Curtis Samuel for Carolina last year. They bring in William Jackson III, who is a solid, okay player. And Brandon Sheriff gets redone, really good guard. So decent moves by the Washington football team. Anything else that you really thought was big deal, or are you just staring at the Samuel Fitzpatrick and Sheriff move right now?
Yeah, that's about the only thing that really caught my attention. I think it's a bit of an improvement at quarterback. As much as I like Alex Smith, he's not the Alex Smith of old. And, he still gets a ton of respect for even coming back after those gruesome injuries that he had earlier on a couple seasons ago. So I definitely tip my hat off to him. But I think that bringing Fitzpatrick in, even though he's more of a journeyman at this point in his career, I think that bringing him in is still an improvement at the position. Now, if that defense can play close to what they played like last season, especially early on that season where they were the number 1 defense in the NFL, I think that they could be competitive. Of course, a lot of it's going to depend on the skill position. I think that that's probably one of the areas you're going to have to address when it comes to the draft, because I still think they're lacking a little bit in the skill position area. So I still see them competing. They obviously won their division last season. They were they went to the playoffs, and I think it was a win for them last season. But as far as this upcoming season is concerned, some improvement, but still not the drastic improvement that I needed to see, especially with the aforementioned Giants and moves they made. I think the Giants are probably better off right now. But of course, we won't know until we actually get teams on the field.
Yeah. Their defense will be there. They just have a ton of talent on it, and it pretty much is what carried them to the playoffs last year. So I was just you mentioned it. I don't know if it's enough on the offensive side of things, and I'm not quite sure they're going to be able to get away with winning, 7 games and winning their division this year. I'm assuming the Cowboys improve with the return of Dak Prescott and at least a couple of defensive signings who can at least competently stand on the field, which last year I'm not sure how many of their players were competently capable of at least standing on the field on the defensive side of things. So I think there's an upgrade there. So you got 2 teams I'm thinking jump up in an upgrade. I just don't. I like Ryan Fitzpatrick. It's a fun story, but I'm not sure that jump. And you mentioned it. McLaurin's really good. Samuel I really like, but I'm not sure either of those I'd categorize necessarily as a out-and-out number 1 receiver. Really good receiver, a receiver
Yes.
you'd like to have on your roster, but it's not in the sort of same class as like a Hopkins or a DK Metcalf or, in that kind of class of receiver. So maybe that's something they get to in the draft, but knowing Ron Rivera, they're going to look a little more on the defensive side of things. Do you think there is going to be regression with the Washington football team? Not necessarily just based on, them playing worse, but with probably 2 teams in the NFC East at least getting better. I don't know what we make of the Eagles. That might be where we go next.
Yeah, I think that. See, it's really hard for me to sit here and think that there's gonna be a regression because they were okay last season. They were 7-9, I believe.
I think they were 7-9, and that's I'm very confused because the defense I know will play well. It will be there, and I think both you and me are both sort of defensive guys. It's just can they manufacture enough on offense?
And, I do like Samuel. I think he's a solid receiver. He's a really tough receiver, but he's not, like you said, one of those quote elite receivers. He's not the type of guy that you can just kind of throw it up there and he'll come down with it. You have confidence that he's going to come down with it. But he's still a solid wide receiver. So I think there's some improvement. I just don't think the improvement is enough based off the moves that other teams have made within the division, and not just the moves they've made, but also the players that they're getting back off of injury, like you talked about with Giants, Saquon Barkley's coming back, and with the Cowboys, you get Prescott back. So I think that it'll be more competitive, and they'll probably have a tougher time. They'll have to play better to win as many games as they won. Not that they're going to be any worse off, because I think the team itself is better than it was last season. I just don't think that they improved enough to keep pace with the improvement of the other teams.
Yeah. All right. So we'll move back up the Northeast here, and the Philadelphia Eagles. It wasn't about signing people. It was more about letting go. I don't even really recognize anyone on this roster anymore. They did make one I think, pretty nice signing. They did sign Anthony Harris, the safety. I really, really like him. So that should at least somewhat help that secondary. But basically, it's a total rehash here in Philadelphia. I'm assuming Jalen Hurts is taking over at quarterback. I'm not going to put that quite in stone just yet, but I guess he'll probably get the first look. How much we see of Joe Flacco, I don't know, but if we're seeing Joe Flacco, we know things have gone wrong. Miles Sanders is still there for however many games he ends up being healthy and playing. And then we get into the overall just receiver core that I'm not sure anyone is good. Alshon Jeffrey is gone. Deshaun Jackson is gone again. Not that those two were all that productive anymore anyway, but that leaves their first-round pick last year, Rieger, Greg Ward, Travis Fulgham, John Hightower. What do you make of this team right now, and is it just Tank City, and we come back next year talking about what they're going to do with their top 3 draft pick?
Obviously, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but this is a team that I foresee in last place in this division. In my opinion, I think that they're probably in a developmental stage right now where they're going to develop some of their younger guys. Like I said, they had a really nice signing with their safety, which they needed because their pass rush actually wasn't bad last season. They were able to get after the quarterback. The problem was that secondary could just not contain anybody. So eventually, if the offensive line could do enough to protect the quarterback, they were going to get it to the receivers one way or another. So I do like the safety signing. I think it's definitely an improvement for that secondary, but they lost a lot of key players and they weren't really replaced with anything that I would say was better than what they lost. So in my opinion, I think that the Eagles, unless they have a really good draft, which I don't foresee happening either, I think they're probably going to end up in last place in this division.
Yeah, and even with that pass rush, I think you also started to see it with all the injuries too. Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, those guys are starting to, I don't want to say slow down, but they're starting to get a little long in the tooth, and one's nicked here, one's nicked there, and when they had all 4 with Barnett, who's the one real young one on the line there, they were really good, but I don't think we got that whole unit pretty much all season long. So I guess the only question I can ask you about this team that isn't Tank is, what do you make of Jalen Hurts here? Future NFL quarterback, future NFL star, career backup who has a pretty solid career, and we know his name for the next 10 to 15 years.
I don't know. I think his story has yet to be told. I'm probably one of the more kinder people when it comes to describing Jalen Hurts. I know that last season when he came on, I was a little hyped up. I thought that he definitely brought different energy to that team. They were on a pretty bad slump, and when he came in, even though they really weren't winning games, because they weren't, I for some weird reason, as I watched Eagle games, I felt like they were winning games. And it took you reminding me during one of our shows that, listen, they're 1-4 over the last 1-5. They lost a lot of games. So he didn't help that area a lot. A lot of it had to do with the fact that they didn't have the weapons, that secondary was poor, as we talked about. But I think his story has yet to be told. I like Jalen Hurts, and I think that he can improve. And if he can improve, I think that he could be a solid quarterback. Great, I don't know. Elite, maybe. But I think he could be a good quarterback as long as he's constantly trying to improve himself, because he definitely showed flashes of it last season.
Yeah. All right. So we've gone through all the 3 teams. I guess we have to go to America's team here and touch on it a little bit. The Dallas Cowboys, really bad season last year. Dak got hurt, though I'm not going to make believe like their season was lost because Dak got hurt. They were pretty terrible with Dak in there, and if it not for the luck of a weird onside kick, they would have been worse than terrible. But they don't re-sign Dak Prescott. He was under contract. They give him an extension, for big bucks. So I guess he's their quarterback for now, at least for the next 2 or 3 years, while that guaranteed money is on the books. They signed Jordan Lewis for 3 years and $13.5 million. They signed Keanu Neal for a 1-year deal if he's healthy. That's a solid safety. But if anybody watched Atlanta Falcons games, the man was on the field about as often as you and I were on the Atlanta Falcons field. So I'm not quite sure how great a signing that is and how great that really upgrades the Dallas Cowboys defense. What do you make of this free agent period for the Cowboys? How big a jump are you looking at for Dallas next season?
I do see a jump for them, just the fact that they're getting Prescott back.
Yeah.
They did lose Andy Dalton, he didn't play great, but he was a serviceable backup. And he did okay in that system. He's obviously now with Chicago, I believe he signed with. But you get your quarterback back, which is the main, the most important thing. That's your leader, that's your captain. So you get him back. That's huge. That's going to help the running game, because the running game, which I kind of thought had to really step up after that Dak Prescott injury, Elliott was almost like non-existent. I don't know what happened to him, but there were so many games where it seemed to me, just watching it, not as a hardcore Cowboy fan, but just as a casual fan watching the game, I felt like he quit on a couple of games. And I felt like some of those injuries were probably more of the ego being hurt than anything. But I think that there definitely is some improvement. I know that they signed a couple of safeties. They got a little bit of help on the defensive line. They did sign a long snapper from the Rams, which I'm a little upset to see go. But McQuaid, he's a really good long snapper. So overall, there's an improvement. The offense is going to be better. I still want to see that defense, because that defense was porous. And that defense really would cost them so many games, because offensively, especially early on, they were putting up huge numbers offensively because they had to, because that defense was not stopping anybody. So if that defense can play better as a unit, then there's definitely going to be some improvement. I don't think that this will be the worst team in that division, but I see them kind of fighting for that third spot, maybe with Washington. So we'll have to see once the games start playing out. But for me right now, definitely an improvement during the offseason, and we still have the draft to go, so they could get even better.
Yeah, I'm not going to say there's going to be a huge jump here. We'll get into the Dak Prescott deal in a couple minutes after this, but I just didn't see enough signing on the defensive end. Now, maybe they're going to draft some guys, but I think filling out your roster with a bunch of young rookies isn't exactly a guarantee to jump your success on the defensive side of things. Now, there is a thing to be said that their defense was so bad that overall it couldn't get any worse, so you might as well plug in some young guys on the cheap out there. But overall, I guess there'll be a little bit of a jump, but I think if we saw anything from this team last year, even when Dak was healthy and throwing up, 450, 500-yard games randomly, they were still losing games. And like we talked about, they were going to go like 0 for 4, 0 for 5 to start the year if it wasn't for that crazy Atlanta game. And it just, I haven't seen enough really about them really making a jump. Now, can they jump the Washington team? Maybe so, but I think both you and I would lean more towards the defensive team there, and possibly the better coach team under Ron Rivera than the Dallas Cowboys. But I just don't see a great improvement there. I don't think they'll be as bad as they were last year, but I'm not even 100% sure I'm penciling in this team in for an automatic playoff contention, even with the expanded playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that they can compete. I think that as long as they can acquire some good talent during the draft, I think they can compete. I don't think that they'll win their division. Now, obviously, it's really early to kind of make these assumptions and predictions, but they definitely have the potential to at least compete. Like I said, it all depends on that defense. If that defense can play well enough to keep them within games, the fact that they got Prescott back is going to improve Elliott's game, and it'll improve the team overall, the team record. So I see their ability to be better. I just don't think it's quite there yet.
Yeah, the Dak Prescott deal, a lot of guaranteed money up front, but like a lot of the deals this year, it's very short, and I think they can cut him after like 3 years. So what'd you make of it? You like the signing? I mean, coming off someone who just had the golf signing and finally dumped that deal, I'm just not always sold on signing a middle tier quarterback. I think we'd go with Dak might be a little bit better than the middle tier, but I wouldn't put him in the elite category right now. And signing him for a whole lot of money, even if it is just for about 3 years guaranteed.
I think that his skill level is definitely more on the lower tier elite level potentially. I don't think he's there yet. Part of it because he doesn't have the weapons, but I think it's a good signing in the sense that after a while you can get out of the contract scot-free almost. But I do want to tip my hat off to Jerry Jones and the Cowboys organization because after that injury, I really didn't think they were going to sign him to this type of money. I thought they were just going to try and see what else they could get simply because there was no guaranteed money when his injury went down. And one of the reasons why a lot of players are really adamant about signing long-term deals, when their contract is coming up. So I do want to applaud the Cowboys and the organization. I think that they did a really good job. It was the right thing to do. He played his heart out for that team, regardless of the record. And he's put fans in the seats. He's put, butts in the seats at home watching the TVs. He's sold jerseys. So he deserves something, and he got something. So I do want to applaud them for that. But again, unless that defense plays better, I just don't see a huge improvement. And unless they make some really impactful moves during the draft, I still see them competing for that third spot.
Yeah. All right. So let's move to the NFC North and the Chicago Bears. I guess they were probably the biggest movers and shakers. I guess there was a half second there where they thought they were going to get Russell Wilson. They got Andy Dalton. I'm not going to hate too much on Andy Dalton. I think talking about middle tier quarterbacks, he's a middle tier quarterback now. He's probably more towards the lower middle tier now than he is towards the upper middle tier when he was younger. But honestly, I don't think it could get any worse at the quarterback position for the Chicago Bears. They franchised Allen Robinson. How much he wants to be there on that franchise tag, I don't know. But anyway, he will be there running slant routes and catching contested balls. Mitchell Trubisky is gone. Kyle Long came out of retirement and signed with the Chiefs. Other than that, not really too much free agency other than the Andy Dalton signing, a little Mario Edwards Jr., but their team is pretty much the same team from last year. Do they get better with the Andy Dalton signing, or do you just sort of look at this as flatlining and this is what they are?
And I'm probably going to be hated on for saying this, and it's probably a very unpopular belief, but I really think that they're probably worse off at the quarterback position. And this isn't me trying to, praise Trubisky or any of that stuff, but Trubisky won games. Now when I looked at the Chicago Bears, their team point differential for the season was 2. I think that was the lowest in the NFL as far as points for, points against. A points differential of 2. That means they were in a lot of really close games, or they blew out a lot of teams and then they got blown out. So I don't know, man. I really don't. I'm not a huge fan. I think that this organization has kind of been on the downswing for quite some time now. The last player that I remember that really wanted to be there was probably Brian Urlacher. So that's a little while ago. But even their quarterbacks, when they traded, with the Broncos, they had a franchise type quarterback, and even that couldn't get them over the hump. It's tough for them, especially when they're going up against the Packers and the Vikings. Kind of season in, season out, they're good, then they're bad. It's tough, man. And I think they got a little bit worse at the quarterback position, which is the most important position on the field. Even their re-signings, like you said, I'm not sure how much longer they're actually planning on being there. But that's probably a good thing for them, because when there's players that don't want to be there and they know that they're probably going to play their butts off. So they're probably going to get a lot of improvement from those skill positions. But overall, I don't see much of an improvement as a team. I think that this is probably a third tier team in that division.
Yeah, I guess they'll be competitive because that defense is still solid. So I'm not going to downgrade them too much. Though I think if people really examine their defensive numbers, they gave up a little bit more than I think people let on. They had some really good games, but overall it wasn't quite as great a defense as I think people think. You know, the thing about the Dalton signing, now, granted, he's not a free agent, but I think you could probably get him for a ham sandwich right now. But I don't understand why they don't go after somebody like Gardner Minshew, who's, I don't know if people realize, but in his 2 years at the Jaguars, he's thrown 38 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. He's been a good quarterback. That first year he played for Jacksonville, he went 6-6. The next year, they weren't even trying to win games. They were purposely trying to lose games. And in 8 games, he went 16 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. I just... You know what Andy Dalton is. He's not. The thing is, he's not going to get better. He's going to be getting worse as he ages, unless he magically ends up in Germany and we get some special syrup injected into him. And even then, I don't think he's going to improve all that much. I just don't know why they didn't either, like you said, hang on to Trubisky. He won games. Now, look, I know the coach hated him, so it is what it is. But I don't quite understand why we like that coach so much. He's pretty much a train wreck in his own right. But I don't understand why you pay somebody like Andy Dalton when you could probably not pay someone like Gardner Minshew any money. I believe he was an undrafted free agent, so he's probably making as much as you and I are right now. So overall, money-wise,
I wish.
It just seems like there were better options out there than Andy Dalton. But hey, maybe he finds a way to be back to his Cincinnati self.
Listen, like you said, and that's exactly, I wanted to interject so bad when you were talking. You're completely right. You know exactly what you're getting out of a guy like Dalton. You know, he was the big red rifle at one point, and now he's the big red pistol. You know, he can still get the job done, but to me, he's a backup. And no offense to him, you know, I'm not trying to be rude or disrespectful, but to me, he's a backup. He serves well as a backup. He's a pretty smart guy. He knows the game, and it's mostly about putting him in a position where he's going to help his team out the best. And I think that's in a backup role. But like you said, you got a guy like Minshew who, yes, the record's not great, but the numbers are pretty good. And again, this guy still has potential. There's still a chance for him to reach some sort of potential, and for them to just kind of look the other way, even though, like you said, it's probably cheaper financially. To me, it's probably a mistake. I don't understand why you wouldn't try to at least make a push for a potential starter in the future. You're not going to make Andy Dalton your future franchise quarterback, whereas in Minshew, even though it's a small percentage, there's still a percentage that he could become that guy. So I don't understand why you wouldn't, roll the dice in this one.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's move further up north and go with the Green Bay Packers. They aren't usually all that active in free agency, and that sort of continued. They signed Kevin King, a cornerback, and then I guess the biggest move was probably re-signing Aaron Jones on, a 4-year, $12 million deal. But if anybody actually looks at that deal, it's only $13 million guaranteed. So it's basically a 1-year deal with a lot of fake years tacked on there. So it's not really as bad as, it looks when it scrolls across the bottom line. I was a little shocked, and I guess not all that shocked, that they lost Corey Lindsey and let him go to the Chargers. That's a pretty big piece, and one of the better linemen in pass protection. And I continue to be baffled by what the Green Bay does by not really trying to upgrade and push. I think we did our last show, we talked about certain teams breaking that bank and going all in and trying to get that Super Bowl, and sort of teams just being fiscally responsible and having enough talent to make sure you get in the playoffs and you have a sort of shot at that roulette wheel if everything goes right. It just feels like this should be one of those teams that should try to grab a handful of guys and go all in one of these times, and they just never do.
Yeah, and it seems probably that's the reason why they can't get over the hump, because even when they've been bad, they're still competitive. I know there was a couple of seasons where the top dog in that division was Minnesota, but I mean, you've got Aaron Rodgers. I guess that's the thought process in Green Bay is you've got Aaron Rodgers, you're okay. As Aaron Rodgers would say, relax. And I think that's exactly what's going on there. I think that they feel that they're good enough to win that division, which will get them in the playoffs. I foresee them winning that division. So unless Jared Goff has some sort of a resurrection over in Detroit, I think that Green Bay is going to win this division. And if that's the case, once you're in the playoffs, it's anybody's game. Aaron Rodgers, as much as I love to hate him and hate to love him, he's money, man. The guy, he puts up big numbers. He was obviously the MVP last season. He put up ridiculous stats. And if he can get close to that this season, as long as they get in the playoffs, they have a shot. So we'll see. Obviously, we still have the draft to go, and we can still make moves during the draft. It's happened before. There could be a blockbuster trade here and there, but I don't foresee that happening with this team. The Green Bay Packers are usually really quiet. It's only after really, really poor seasons that they actually make a big splash, and I don't foresee this being one of those seasons. So I think losing that offensive lineman is going to be impactful, but Aaron Rodgers is a really smart quarterback. He's a veteran. He's savvy, and I think that he can get past losing an offensive lineman.
Yeah. All right. We'll move on from the Green Bay Packers and move to interesting, the Detroit Lions. I think we talked about them being possibly the worst franchise in sports history. Honestly, I don't think the Jared Goff move equates to being the worst sports franchise in history. It seems like a pretty lateral move with Matt Stafford, but I was a little confused with the receiver switch here. Out goes Kenny Golladay. They didn't seem to want to pay him. Out goes Marvin Jones. They bring in Tyrell Williams, who was just off getting overpaid in Oakland and cut after a year because he couldn't stay healthy, and then bring in Brashard Perryman, who pretty much the same thing with the Jets. Got hurt, has long not been able to stay healthy. So those two in, Jones and Golladay out. They had Jamal Williams from the Packers as a backup running back. I don't know. Anything you make of this team other than bad?
Listen, I actually think that the Jared Goff move for them was actually okay, as far as compared to for the Rams. I think it was okay for them because they get some draft capital and they get a guy they can use now. They can run him into the ground. Until they can actually acquire the type of team or the type of player that they actually want to go forward with. No disrespect to Jared Goff. He, as much as I criticized him last season, at the end of the season during the playoffs, during that playoff run, he showed some toughness, and I criticized him a lot for lack of toughness throughout the season, but he showed a little bit of heart, and I wish him well. I hope he does well in Detroit. It's just that team, man. It's just, they've been bad for a long time, and I don't see them getting any better this season. I could almost lock it in that this is going to be the team in fourth place in that division, and I don't think people would give me a lot of argument with that. So I don't see big signings. I don't see big losses. I think this team is just about at par as it was last season.
Yeah, I'm guessing last place is quite in their future here. So we'll move on to the Minnesota Vikings. it was a little uneventful as well. They lost Anthony Harris. We spoke about his signing with the Eagles. They did sign Patrick Peterson, who at one point in time was a really, really good corner. Now he's sort of an old corner who's okay. They got Mackenzie Alexander on a relatively cheap deal to fill some holes. I think we're both probably a little shocked that somehow the QB carousel did not come up on their side of things. And I guess right now Kirk Cousins is still their QB. They have some depth at receiver. Is Minnesota going to be better this year, or pretty much about the same that they were last year? Inconsistent, and one day look good, one day look bad.
Yeah, and listen, I think that they're a little worse off in that secondary, losing their safety, but that defense was on and off all season. There were times when we thought they were getting ready to turn that corner and become the type of Minnesota Viking team that we've known over the last few seasons, and they would put up a dud. So unfortunately for them, it's not looking any better. I don't think that they can really improve much unless they show some sort of consistency on defense and try to make their quarterback an actual game manager, which I think is probably his best attribute. I don't see them getting any better. Now, they do have a lot of really good skill players. They have some depth at wide receiver. They have, solid running back game. So they can definitely contend. But again, it's going to come down to the consistency on defense. If there's no consistency on defense, then I don't foresee them getting any better. But if they can play better, they've got the type of running game where they can really turn the quarterback into a game manager and just rely on the running game and the defense. And if they do that, I think they'll be successful. But it's hard to tell with this team. They were so up and down, so Jekyll and Hyde last season, that it's really hard to tell.
Yeah, I have no clue how to read this team. I'll be very interested to see what they do in the draft. But we'll move on down to the NFC South, and we'll start out with the Atlanta Falcons. They didn't really do anything in free agency. They lost some guys. We talked about Keanu O'Neal signing with the Dallas Cowboys. Alex Mack, their really good center, signed with San Francisco. So, I mean, if anything, they lost more than they brought on. They did bring in Mike Davis, the running back from Carolina. I don't know what that means for Todd Gurley other than probably retirement. But overall, Atlanta stays the same. I don't see much difference in this team. I'm assuming the offense will be really good. I don't think I foresee the defense being that much better, but I don't know. It's a weird team. I think if anybody probably underachieved and lost games they shouldn't have, and probably if a couple different moves of the ball go differently, they're probably a playoff team. So maybe they jump back up into that playoff contention at least, especially with their offensive skill level. But just probably a harder team to read than the Minnesota Vikings. I don't think any of us would be shocked that the Minnesota Vikings would be terrible, but it's hard to imagine the Falcons being terrible again when you look at their offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, but again, with them last season, we were criticizing, especially the first half of the season, we were criticizing their defense. Their offense was putting up really spectacular numbers. Even Todd Gurley was getting in the mix. Now, I know that he's not the Todd Gurley of old, but he was showing flashes of the old Todd Gurley. And offensively, they were running in full stride. Defensively, that's a different story. They were like the Cowboys. They couldn't stop anybody, which is why they got up in a lot of games and they just couldn't close out. Part of that had to be with the fact that Todd Gurley is sort of a liability when it comes to closing out a game. You can't put him out there and really have him be the shutdown type guy that he once was. He just doesn't have it in him, I think. And then that defense couldn't stop anybody. But offensively, wide receivers, quarterback, they're really solid. Then the second half of the season came along, and they fired their head coach, and the defense really improved. The defense was playing a lot better, but the offense an improvement. Like you said, I have a really hard time reading this team. I don't know how to actually break it down, whether they're better or worse. But this division in general is really tough. So I don't foresee them, really competing, especially against the Tampa Bays and the Saints, even with the losses there. I don't know. I'm really confused what's going to happen with this team going forward, but they definitely have a chance at being competitive if they can play well. But we can say that about just any team. There's very few teams that don't have the talent to compete if they play well. This team has the talent. It's just whether they can put it together or not.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's move to Carolina. And the big move the other day, they bring in Sam Darnold. Be very interesting to see how that goes. I'm assuming some offensive players get drafted this year after going all defense last year. We mentioned Curtis Samuel signing with the Washington football team, Mike Davis going out, but we assume Christian McCaffrey will be back healthy. I did like the Hassan Reddick and Denzel Perriman signings on the defensive side of things. I think that defense will be a little bit improved as those young guys from the last draft mature a little bit, and bringing in a couple guys who are veterans in there to stabilize it. But this is going to hinge on that play. I don't think either of us thought Teddy Bridgewater was a superstar, but I think we both at least knew what we had in Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy wasn't going to lose you any games. I think Sam loses you some games. So is it worth the risk to maybe have Sam cost you a couple games if he finds his way and maybe can win you a couple games? I haven't seen it, but maybe you see something I don't.
I think this one's actually a bit tricky to break down. I'm not a huge Sam Darnold fan, and I know that a lot of people were really hyped on him when he came into the NFL, but I didn't know much about him to begin with, and even when he got in, he was with the Jets, so we got what we got, and unfortunately for him, it wasn't really good. So I don't have huge expectations for Darnold. With that being said, as much as I like Teddy Two Gloves, I think that he cost him a few games last season, which is not something that I expected because I've always seen him as a good game manager. I thought that if he could rely on his running game, and the defense could play solid play, I thought that they would be competitive. And there was a few instances where they really played that way. And I was really gloating about it. But unfortunately, Teddy wasn't the type of Teddy that I thought he was going to be. He, like I said, he cost him a couple of games, and that defense wasn't really consistent. Now, they did lose McCaffrey, which was huge. But we did see a resurgence of the rest of the running game. They played pretty well. And we saw a huge improvement from the skill positions at wide receiver. So I think that if Darnold could come in and manage the game, which is not something that was really expected of him in New York, where they were constantly down, and that defense with the signings that they made, if they can play consistent defense, I think this is going to be a solid team. I think that they could be sneaky good. A lot of it's going to depend on Sam Darnold, though. If he can manage the game the way I expected Teddy to manage the game, honestly, I know this is going to come as a shock, but I wouldn't be surprised if they competed for the number 2 spot in that division.
Yeah, I really like a lot of pieces on this team. The one piece I don't like is Sam Darnold. I just can't buy it. And I didn't buy it in college. He had a really good last half his freshman year and then had his superstar bowl game, which he lit up a bunch of yards. But nobody cares about stats in a bowl game. And then that next year he came in and he was throwing picks all over the place. And, that has not stopped. He's not much different than a Jameis Winston type, and actually I see more upside with a Jameis Winston. At least I've seen Jameis win games and throw up big numbers. I've never really seen Sam have huge offensive games. All I've seen him do is have really bad games. Now, what of that is the situation with the New York Jets and with Adam Gase? They never really gave him any shot, but I'm just not a believer. But I really like this coaching staff. I like a lot of players on this team. I think we both sort of like this team and the way it fought last year. So it's just it was a big gamble to me to go after Sam. I don't know if I trust him, but if anybody can do anything with him, I think it's this Carolina coaching staff. So it'll be interesting to see if they can jump our next team we're going to go to here, the New Orleans Saints. So Breeze is retired. We got Winston and Taysom Hill battling it out. Both re-signed / got a fake extension, but the Saints were one of those teams like your Rams that were in pretty much cap hell. So they had to unload a lot of defensive guys. Rankins went to the Jets. Alazone went to Detroit. It's that I'm getting a little nervous that I don't know if the Saints start chipping away at that defense, which was really more than the offense, the reason they were in games last year. Now, this offense remains really solid. I think whoever plays quarterback will be just fine with the way Sean Payton schemes things. You got Thomas, you got Kamara. I think the Emmanuel Sanders loss hurts a little bit, but Traquan Smith showed a little bit of life last year, like he could maybe make up that number 2 spot. And, the line should be solid as it was last year, but I'll be very interested to see if they can cover their defensive losses this time around. What do you make of the Saints?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. The Saints, whenever anybody talks about the Saints, the first thing that comes to mind is that offense. And a lot of it has to do with, the fact that Drew Brees, who's now gone, and Sean Payton had such a good rapport together. I don't like Payton. I'm not a huge fan of the coach, but I do admit that he's an offensive genius. The guy can put together really good schemes and really good game plans. And it's one of the reasons why his teams have been as successful as they have been. One of the reasons why Breeze was able to put up the type of numbers that he put up, even as he aged and he dealt with injuries and, guys coming in and out. So the issue now is that the defense, like you said, is what kept them in games last season. With Breeze in and out of the lineup and, Thomas in and out of the lineup, they were having a lot of issues on the offensive side of the board. And that defense really stepped up. They played really solid game. There were so many games where we thought that either it would be a tight game or they would probably lose, and they played lockdown defense. So defensively, they seem to have digressed a little bit. At the quarterback position, whether you want to look at it as anybody can play under Payton's scheme. Yeah, I think anybody can play under Payton's scheme, but not everybody's Drew Brees. And we saw when Hill took over as the quarterback position last season. Yeah, he was serviceable, but he wasn't putting up Breeze numbers. And eventually, the NFL will catch up to whatever type of style you run. We know what Taysom Hill is going to do. He's going to sit back there, and he's going to run the option and things like that. And when teams know this is your quarterback, basically for 95% of the snaps you're going to play, you know what to plan for at that point. And then it becomes more of a, can that defense hold their offense to keep us in the game long enough for Taysom Hill to make a play? And I think that's where they're going to run into some issues. I see some digression. I still think the coaching staff is probably one of the better coaching staffs in that division. But I think that there's definitely digression. I don't see them winning this division again this season. And I think that they're probably going to be competing with Carolina for that number 2 spot in the division.
Yeah. I'm curious if you think Taysom will be the quarterback or you think Jameis Winston will win that job in the preseason. I know Peyton loves both guys, so it's really hard to get a read here. But I think Jameis might be the quarterback, and we continue to get Taysom Hill in the role that, really he's best at. I love that role where he's, sometimes a tight end, sometimes a quarterback, sometimes a running back, can get on special teams, and you got him doing a little bit of everything. So I'm curious what Jameis looks like in this offense if he ends up getting the job. I'm curious who you think will win it in the preseason.
I really thought that Winston should have got the job last season. And I think he's going to win it this season, just the fact alone that they even decided to keep him on the team. The fact they even signed him, even after that horrible season where he had all those turnovers, he led the league in turnovers. there's something they see in him that they really like. I don't know if it's the gunslinger mentality or what it is. We joked about it a little bit during last season that we thought he was going to get the start when Breeze went down, and we talked about his contacts where he was wearing contacts now so he could actually see the field clearly. Again, he was in there for a few snaps last season, and I think he looked okay. I think he wins the job this season, and I think that, like you said, he's more of a Swiss Army knife. He's a multi-tool, and I think that's what really complements his game, and in turn complements the offense. Is just use him in different places, and I think that they'd be best suited to run the team through Winston, and then bring in him as a gadget player whenever needed.
All right, so let's move on to the Super Bowl champs and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They could not sign any free agents because they were too busy signing all their players to run this back. I don't know quite how they did it. In 2 years, we might be talking about the Tampa Bay Bucs as the worst team in football due to what they're going to do to their salary cap here. But it looks like they're going to try to run it back for the next year or two. Basically, everybody's back. What do you make of what Tampa Bay did?
I mean, can you really fault them? We talked about it at the beginning of last season that they definitely went all in for the season when they signed Brady. They even brought Gronk out of retirement. They went all in last season, and that's what they're doing this season. And there's been a few teams that have attempted, a kind of a style that way of managing their team that way. And that's what they're doing. They're in it to win it right now. Anything less than a Super Bowl is going to be a fail for them. But I don't know. I mean, it's really hard to repeat. And I know that they have probably the greatest of all time to be able to try to, make another run. But it's going to be tough, man. It's going to be tough, and not so much for their own division, but just the NFL in general. A lot of teams are going to be, much more improved, especially on the NFC side of the ball. So I like their chances. Obviously, they're the defending champs. They got Brady. Even Gronk, who decided to test out the free agency market, came back. So, I mean, you can't really fault them. They've got a ring. So regardless of whatever your thoughts may be, that kind of pays off for this year also. Even if they have an off year, the ring last year makes up for it.
Yeah. All right, we'll go past the Bucs and talk about them at win total time. I'm guessing at the end of July, but we'll move out west and we'll start out in Seattle. Very interesting offseason in Seattle. They lose Shaquille Griffin to Jacksonville. They get your boy Gerald Everett. I don't know how quite big a deal that is, but he is a nice little hybrid blocking receiving tight end. They bring back Chris Carson. They re-sign Carlos Dunlap. So they're pretty much the same, overall. Not too much on the free agent signings other than re-signing Dunlap. They bring back pretty much the same team, and even Russell Wilson will be back. I don't know how much of that was real, how much of that was just sort of gauging the market for what Russell Wilson was worth on it, because I don't think they got what they thought they would get for him. That's why he's still there. But what do you make of Seattle's free agency period?
Let me just double check. Is Russell Wilson still there?
Russell Wilson is still there.
Yeah, I think they're going to be fine. Listen, this team, we've seen them have really great defense. We've seen them with their lockdown defense, the Legion of Boom. We've seen them with really poor defense. Last season was one of the worst seasons for that defense until the very end of the season where they improved. And they're always in it. It seems like they're always in it. A lot of it has to do with the fact that Russell Wilson is a really good quarterback. And even when he plays poorly, he just needs that one instance. He just needs to be close enough in that game to make a play, and he's probably going to make the play. I'm a Ram fan, okay? So normally I would sit here and I would make a huge deal about the whole friction between the coaching staff and Russell Wilson, because I do think it's real. I do think that there's issues there. There's some animosity, and it may come into play. But even as a Ram fan, I have to just say, I think that Russell Wilson's skill level supersedes the fact that there is tension there. As bad as it may be, I think that he's professional, and he's going to put his best foot forward, and he's going to play his best football possible. And we know what he's capable of. So Metcalf, I think, is going to be improved this season as good as he was last season. I think he's going to take a leap forward. The guy's a freak when it comes to the physical attributes. He's got the hands, he's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got everything you could want in a number one wide receiver. So I don't see this team really taking a step back. I see them competing for division title in the NFC West. As much as I hate to admit it, regardless of losses, regardless of additions, they're going to be a solid team.
Yeah, I think Seattle will be just fine. Defense might be a little bit improved. I look for Metcalf to grow and get a little better. They re-signed Lockett. I probably should have mentioned that.
Lockett's a really good receiver.
It wasn't a free agent signing, but to lock him up for a couple more years, I think really compliments DK Metcalf. So overall, I think Seattle, as always, will be right there in the mix to stir it up. Let's move to the San Francisco 49ers. I didn't want to get too much into sort of draft talk because we're going to do that later, but I don't think we could sort of preview this without mentioning the San Francisco 49ers pretty much moving up to the number 3 spot and pretty much waving their arms and signaling we're taking a quarterback here. I'm curious of your thoughts on they keep Garoppolo this year, let a quarterback sort of understudy, and then cut him because they're going to get hammered on his cap number this year, whether they cut him or play him no matter what. Not a ton of free agent signings. They re-signed most of their guys, Trent Williams, Verrett. They did get Alex Mack. We mentioned it from the Atlanta Falcons. They re-signed Quan Williams. They did get Samson Ikaboom from your Rams, who had a little bit of a down year, but we'll get into the Rams sort of having to, cut bait with sort of those secondary backup guys because their cap situation was so bad. But overall, what do you make of San Francisco? What do you make of them moving up? What do you think they're going to sort of do here?
I think that the San Francisco 49ers, again, another divisional opponent, and also my brother's favorite team, which made for really fun Sundays. The coaching staff is actually really good. I think that they're quietly one of the better coaching staffs in the NFL. They put together the type of game plans that just about any player can succeed in. That's the type of system that they have. I think that they'd be best suited to run Garoppolo one more year because we haven't really seen a full season from him. Whether it's because he got traded and then he was hurt and whatever the issues were. I still think he's a solid quarterback. I think that he can thrive in the system. We've seen other quarterbacks do well in this system. It's just the fact that he hasn't been consistently healthy long enough to, go a full season. I think that if he can go a full season, then we'd probably have a different idea about what Garoppolo's worth actually is. I think he's a solid quarterback. Health is the big issue with him. But if he can stay healthy, I think that they'd be best suited to obviously draft a quarterback, which is what they're probably going to do, which is why they gave up all that capital to move up in the draft. And just have him kind of study, behind Garoppolo. And if the need comes, like I said, Garoppolo hasn't been the most durable guys in the NFL. So if the need comes, then you have your young guy to throw into the fire. But to me, I feel like this system is very friendly for just about any quarterback. So you probably just run Garoppolo, hope for the best. They were a solid team last season as it was. They competed in just about every game, except for that Dolphin game, I think was the only game that they really got hammered. So I think that if they can stay healthy long enough, I think they can be successful. They're going to be this division in general is going to be really tough. The NFC West to me is probably still the best division of football. And the San Francisco 49ers are no slouches. I think they're going to be a tough team. I think they're going to be improved this season.
Yeah, I really do think San Francisco is sort of a dark horse to maybe win this division, even with the Rams move and the constant presence of the Seattle Seahawks. I really like them. It's just really hard to judge until we see what they do in the draft. See what they do with Garoppolo. I think a healthy Jimmy G running that team, it makes them contenders in this division and therefore makes them contenders in the NFC. you put a rookie quarterback in there, and probably one that's not Trevor Lawrence, then I'm a little more nervous about you being able to contend no matter what Mike Shanahan can sort of conjure up here. But I'm just, it's sort of been incomplete till I see what happens with Jimmy G in that quarterback situation. But I do think overall, with team health back, I think the 49ers are a team to reckon with. So I'm very curious how that draft will play out there.
Just to clear it up, you did mean Kyle Shanahan, right?
Did I say Mike?
Yeah.
All right, Kyle. Mike's probably not too bad mentoring quarterbacks still either, but it might be a little old.
Yeah, the only thing I can say about Mike Shanahan is I hated taking any of his running backs in fantasy because I always got Shanahan.
All right. Well, speaking of teams living in the past, the Arizona Cardinals signed an all-pro team from 2015. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but they bring in J.J. Watt. I think at our in-show, you were talking about them probably trying to bring in a receiver. I don't know if A.J. Green is who you meant by bringing in a receiver to star opposite DeAndre Hopkins, but in 2015 it would have been a great move. In 2021, I'm not sure that's really an upgrade over a aging Larry Fitzgerald, who we don't know whether he'll be back or not. He hasn't quite said, but either way, I don't know. They lose Patrick Peterson. I mean, he was aging, but he was still a solid cornerback. You lose him. They lost Kenyon Drake, which isn't that big a deal, but they did trade for him 2 years ago and gave up a pick for him. So I just, honestly, I don't really know where this team is going. If you could tell me what way they're going, I'd be sure to listen.
Listen, they're still going to be a solid team. Okay, I don't see a huge improvement from last season, but there is an improvement there. Now, I think the J.J. Watt signing was a bit of a reach. I think that J.J. Watt's best days are behind him, and I'm not trying to downplay his skill, ability, his skill or his ability or his potential. He can still be a really solid defensive lineman, but he's not J.J. Watt anymore. He's still with a lot of injuries throughout his career. Houston really ran him into the ground. He was basically the backbone of that team. Even offense, defense didn't matter. He was the guy. And because of it, he got ran into the ground, so he's had to deal with a lot of injuries. So he's not quite the same player. So I think they might have reached, not in signing him, it's a good signing, but the amount of money that they gave up to sign him, I think that was probably a big mistake. Now, the A.J. Green signing, listen, A.J. Green is not your number one wide receiver there. That's what you got Hopkins for. If A.J. Green can be close, even close to what he was in Cincinnati, you've got a solid number two wide receiver, just not just solid. You have a big body, a guy that can go up for the ball. So it takes a lot of the pressure off of Hopkins also. So I think in turn that helps Murray out because it opens up the field and he can get out and scramble and do his thing, what he loves to do, which is, kind of run to the outside, look for an open wide receiver and either sling it because he can sling it. The guy can throw it down the field. Or he can, run for a first down, which is another thing that he's capable of doing. So I think that this team is definitely improved. I just think that when it comes to, financially, I don't think that the gains really outweigh the improvement that they gained. I think they probably reached a little too deep into their pockets for this improvement. They probably would have been better served to go look elsewhere for this type of improvement.
Yeah, I sort of equated. It's not, JJ's got a little more life, but I equated to, sort of what the Nets did this in the buyout market, signing Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge, and we get ESPN flashing up their all-NBA and, all-star numbers, and I'm like, well, LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin haven't been an all-star in 4 years. They're no longer all-star LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin, and I'm like, they were throwing up J.J. Watt, Defensive Player of the Year, and A.J. Green, all-pro teams and Pro Bowls, and I'm like, well, that's great in 2016 when they were both, all pros. Now they are no longer all pros, so you aren't getting the exact same player just because his name is the same. So I sort of equate it there, though. JJ's got a little more life, though, in 2 of the last 4 years, he's had back issues and missed the season. So, I don't even think we want to get into the AJ Green injury history, which wasn't even all that great when he was a all-pro level receiver. So just don't quite understand where this team is. And, it's hard for them, too, because no matter what they really did, they were always going to be 4th best in this division.
Yeah, I think that they're definitely going to be – this division is just so tough, man. I don't want to, say something now and then bite my tongue later on about it, but if I had to guess, I would say that the Cardinals are probably going to be in 4th place in this division. That doesn't mean that they're going to be, a bad team. And, of course, there's a little bit of bias there also because you got a Ram fan here.
Yeah. All right. So we'll move to the Rams. The upgrade, supposedly, of Matthew Stafford is there. The offense looks all right, but I think we talked about it before on a different show. Their cap was in hell, so you start getting these cuts, and, John Johnson signs with Cleveland, Troy Hill signs with Cleveland. We mentioned Everett signing with Seattle. They did manage to bring Leonard Floyd back. I thought that was good, but Josh Reynolds goes, to Tennessee. It's just, a whole lot of guys. Blythe with Casey, and we just,
McQuaid.
It's a whole lot of depth going away, and it just leaves you thin at the back where you can't afford injuries to any of these really high level skill players, or else your season's pretty much sunk because all your depth is signed elsewhere. So what do you make of the Rams offseason? What are you looking forward to in the season coming up?
It's going to be a really interesting season as a Ram fan. I'm interested to see what Matthew Stafford's got to offer. Now, if there's one thing that I questioned about Jared Goff for most of the season last year was his toughness. I don't think that's something I have to really question with Matthew Stafford. I think that even as poor as that team has been, even as many issues as they've had, the injuries he's dealt with, one thing he's always shown is toughness. The guy's going to hang in there, and he's going to try and make a throw, make a play, win the game. Now, he hasn't had a lot of success in Detroit. Hopefully that changes. Hopefully that doesn't come over here with him in that trade. But I understand the Rams had to make that move. And I like Jared Goff. I wasn't ever a huge Jared Goff guy. I've said it numerous times that during the draft, I always thought that Wentz was going to be our better option. Now we see where Wentz is at. But I understand that it had to be made. So whatever. We're moving on. We've got Stafford. Now, when it comes to the free agency, we lost a lot of depth. Like you said, Reynolds wasn't a huge, receiver, but this season he definitely showed a lot of improvement when it came to stepping up, when guys went down with injury. He was still realistically the number 4 guy on the team. So not a huge loss, but still a loss of a guy that was definitely looking better as the season progressed. We lost, there's a lot of losses. This is one of the situations where the general manager's skill level and the coaching staff getting together and really coming up with a solid game plan for the draft, this is where we're really going to be able to tell how much talent that front office actually has, because they're going to be very, very heavily dependent on filling a lot of that depth gap with a bunch of young rookie guys, which, excuse me, isn't always a good thing, but it's something you have to do right now, unfortunately, because of the situation you put yourself in with those big contracts you gave out.
Yeah.
So we still got Aaron Donald. I've got that. So as long as we got Aaron Donald, I'm going to,
Well, that's the one I'd say most pray to the health gods to. So,
yes.
Well, maybe Matthew Stafford too, because I don't think you want to get into that backup quarterback situation either. But anyway, it'll be very interesting. I'm very curious to get to our draft show in a couple weeks to see the needs that the Rams are looking to fill. But next week we'll be back on Wednesday to do the AFC side of things. Really looking forward to that. that. Be sure to follow us on Greenlight Network on Facebook, Greenlight Network on YouTube. Where can we find you, Achilles?
As always, you can find me on Twitter at TD Achilles, or you can also find me on Facebook as Achilles Rain.
You can find me, GLN Champ 5, on Twitter and Instagram. Also, be sure to look out for our Winning Daily show. Airs every day with our picks and daily fantasy players of the day. We'll be back next week on Football Time with Achilles Rain to break down the AFC. That's our show, and we're out.